Darragh, great to have you on Live Like an Athlete. Um, I know that you know Gemma from school. Is that right, Gemma? You were in school together?
Yeah, we were a couple of years apart. I was ahead of Dara, but we know each other from school. Yeah.
She didn't bully you, I hope, Darragh.
No, no, no run-ins like that.
She tends to try and bully us from time to time.
Only when I need to.
You're saying you're are you in camp now, Darragh?
Aye, so just 4.5 weeks out now. So yeah, the home stretch now.
Great,
We're just
great.
over halfway there.
So for people who might not know you, Darragh, what is it that you do? And give us your little introduction. Where are you from?
So I'm from Donegal, Mavall Greencastle, same place as Gemma, and I'm a professional MMA fighter signed with Bellator. I turned professional. Um, I was meant to turn pro at the end of 2021, and then I ended up making my pro debut February of last year.
And what were the kind of thought processes and the decisions that led to that point? Did you always know that professional fighting was something that you wanted to do, or was it something that evolved?
Well, when I decided that I was going to give MMA a go, I decided on day one that I was going to give it everything I had. So it was always the goal to turn pro eventually, and I have other goals set now. So I always knew I'd turn pro.
I feel like whenever I suppose it wasn't something that was really common in school. Like it wasn't, you wouldn't have heard of many people getting into that, especially back when I suppose when we were younger. And it's really taken off now. But what was it that like how did you first get into it, or was there somebody that introduced it to you, or where did that interest come from?
Well, my older brother Aaron, he was big into it, so he would always buy the DVDs for the Ultimate Fighter and the UFC. So I took a keen interest in it there, and I wasn't exactly doing very much at school, so that was kind of my backup plan deep down. But I didn't tell anyone I was going to go for it. So I think it was maybe 6 months after school stopped. That's when I started. So
And was there a lot of support when you were training? Was there people around you that made you feel like this was actually possible, or do you feel like this was all, internal, a real drive that you just had personally?
it was mostly internal, because I was always coming up with mad notions, and I wouldn't stick at them very long. And I suppose mum and dad thought this was the same again, But in fairness, them after maybe a year, they seen that I was committed to it and that I was getting on well with it. So after I started, after I was in it long enough for them to see that I actually cared about it, everyone started supporting me then. So, but most of it was just me. And
Did it start with boxing or other combat sports before you moved into MMA?
so where we're from in Maville, there's no boxing club, there's no kickboxing, there's nothing.
Wow.
There's a jiu-jitsu club now, but when I started, there was nothing. So I moved up to Letterkenny, which is about an hour away, and I started in Healy and Gracie. I heard that they were the best local club, and they were 90% jiu-jitsu based, but they had a boxing coach and a kickboxing coach who would come in a couple of times a week. And they had MMA going as well there. So I spent my first 3 years in Letterkenny with Healy and Gracie.
If I'm being very honest here, you know, I have a very superficial understanding of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd like, I suppose, to get a bit of an insight to what draws people into MMA over other combat sports. What was it for you that you felt that that was something you could excel in?
Well, I like the idea of um, not being one dimensional. Like I had the idea like boxing, you might be able to beat other boxers, but can you compete against someone who's going to be able to take you to the ground? I wanted to see who was the toughest overall. Who I suppose it was the ultimate form of combat. It really proves who the best is, who the toughest is, I guess. So that
And
that kind of and it to an outsider, it looked more violent, and that kind of intrigued me a bit more as well, I suppose.
What like do you have brothers and sisters? Was your home a place where it fostered that type of competitive environment?
So I have three brothers. I have two older brothers and one younger. And I suppose that toughened me up having two older brothers. Is is on the bad side of things every day for a good few years now. But so maybe that made four boys in the house. So I suppose there was a bit of competitiveness. All right. Definitely toughened me up now. And then I suppose I toughened the younger brother up. He's at it now as well. So maybe that's where it all started.
Was it a sporting household? Did they I say your younger brother is involved? What's his name?
Ryan. So
Ryan.
he just turned 19. I was the sporty one, I suppose you would say. I was playing a lot of soccer and a wee bit of Gaelic football as well. I done athletics for a while, so I was the one who was into the sports, I suppose.
Darragh, when you said that whenever you chose MMA as the sport that you wanted to do, and you're like, this is where I want to go, what was your thought process behind that? And what kind of were your key drivers to get to where you are now?
Don't really. I suppose I always fancied myself when it came to fighting. So I always, without saying to many people, I thought I'd be good at it.
Mm.
And for me, I just took a keen interest in it. It was, what would you say, it was the most impressive thing someone could do for me is get into MMA and excel at it. So I always, that was my dream. I wanted to go as far as I could with it.
And whenever you started training, then do you feel like you took to it very quickly, or did you find it was more difficult than you anticipated, or what kind of whenever you initially stepped into that gym, what was kind of your biggest learnings?
I definitely did take it pretty quick. I knew it was going to be tough. I didn't realize how tough it was going to be training 2-3 times every day. I was shocked at how sore the body got. You build a tolerance up to anything you do, but for the first maybe month or two, it was a shock to the system for sure. And for maybe 2 years before that, I stopped all sports. I used to play soccer at a decent level, and I'd be fairly fit, but kind of went off track a bit, and I was out partying too much, and I wasn't the fittest going into it, so it was a rough enough start. But I did take to it fairly quick, and uh, fell in love with it straight away. Like it was everything I thought it was going to be.
So did you start from going from no training to 3 sessions a day, or was that kind of built up over time?
No, I literally just jumped in the deep end. It was like I told myself if you can't do it, you're not tough enough for it or whatever. So I gritted it out.
Was there any hard lessons learned from that approach, over time that certain things maybe they have to be adapted or
I would say, well, there's plenty of beatings involved. That's kind of lots of lessons learned in that direction of things. But I did pick up a lot of injuries as well. So I've kind of learned over the years now to kind of be able to look after the body a bit more. Obviously, there's a few injuries here and there, but I remember at the start I didn't have the sense to know when to pull back. So I would get badly, I would get injured quite a bit, and then also my energy. Like I remember before fights where I would cut my calories down and I'd be still training 3 times a day, and I wouldn't even be able to dry my hair after a shower or something. I had no sense that kind of way, but definitely toughened me up, I suppose.
just looking back on that experience back then it might have felt you can speak for this, but it might have felt like the only way. Has that thinking changed now?
I definitely. Um, I do like parts of that approach as well. I know you're always told you do too much and you need to take days off and all, but I do think you get a wee bit complacent and a wee bit softer then. I do like the old kind of fashion way as well, but not to that extreme, obviously. But the approach has definitely changed drastically, but maybe a wee bit more of that old kind of way does help every now and again as well.
Darragh, we talk an awful lot about the mindset of high performers and there being key characteristics that come through. And I haven't met you before, but you can sense the the understanding that you have physically of what's required, and there seems to be a serious appetite that you have for punishment in terms of the training that you do, and you're not afraid of hard work. How would you describe the mindset of somebody who's going to take the journey or go on the journey that you've been on, because it's not always going to go your own way? How would you describe how your mindset has evolved, or how that part of your resilience has developed?
Well, I suppose your mindset changes. Like, I suppose, if you go out for a run, maybe this isn't a good way to describe it. You just start, maybe a couple of kilometers is challenging for you, and soon you build it up. You can do 5 comfortably, and then you can do 10. I think your mindset's like anything else. The more you can withstand, the tougher you're and more resilient you become. So maybe what was very challenging for me when I started training 2 or 3 times a day, and they might have been easy sessions, but to me back then they were very challenging. Whereas now that might feel like a normal day. So I think as you come on, the more you face, the more learning you do, and the more resilient you become.
I suppose I'd like to evolve it a little bit more, Darragh, to how would you describe your mindset towards your evolution as an athlete, or how that has changed over time? Because it's such a big part of it, and uh, I know that as you move through the sport and as you go along and you have more wins and setbacks, you develop that resilience too. I mean, is that part of the conversations that you have with coaches and trainers? I suppose it's just something that we're so fascinated about because it's so closely linked. People who perform really well are able to do the physical work, but also have this wider appreciation of their mindset being in the right place too.
I think for me is like it's always it's always wanting more. Like I'm surrounded by like 80. There's 80 on my pro team in SBG. So it's one thing to get the physical work in, but I want to be staying on top of the pack. So when I have my cardio sessions for the week, my weight sessions, and I'm not sure if this links in or not, but I could tell myself when I go to do a session that I'm doing 15 sprints and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And then it could come into my head that, right, we're going to do 20 instead today for some reason. And once I get that feeling or that thought comes to my head, I can't not do 20. So things like that, I'm never really happy with what I aim to do. I'm always aiming for more. I'm trying to not just outdo myself, what I've done in the past, but outdo everyone in the room as well to try and stay on top. And I not even just like I try and aim to be the top in my gym, as in work rate. Because if you're not top in your own gym, you're not going to be top all over the world. Like there's somebody out there who's outworking you. So I aim just to place in the top out of my own gym, I suppose you could say. But even when complacency kicks in, like you're always complacent for a couple of weeks at least after your fight, you're kind of starting to chill out a bit. And I think you need that as well. Mentally, you're going to burn out if you can't. And you really see the complacency once you come back. You're off the mark. Even that 2 weeks it'll humble you again, and you see what needs to be done. It's consistency all year round, but so you can't really afford to switch off for too long, or you will be left behind.
Outside of you're fighting that physical battle, and it seems like you're on top in that sense within yourself. What is your mind like in terms of you're outside training, you wake up in the morning, like what's your processes to allow you to, I suppose, be your best on a daily basis and keep you on top? What's your self-talk, your conversations like?
Well, I think that's definitely something to do more work in. My mindset at times can be just get through today. Uh, you know, I try not to think too much long term, like because even camps, for instance, they're 8 to 10 weeks, and they're miserable. Like your calories are dropped, you're drained, you're training harder than ever. It's a miserable time. Like, and I think when you even think of one camp, it can just be too daunting. So I don't even take it one day at a time. I take it one session at a time. And I just tell myself, just get through this next one, see how you feel, get through the next one. It's baby steps really. But as for talking to myself now, I used to do a bit of visualization before fights and scenarios, but recently I haven't. I'm not in a bad headspace anyway. So
I've listened to a couple of your videos, the blog format, and hearing, I suppose, the way that other people in your camp, I think it was in Finland, is it?
Iceland. Yeah.
Iceland, sorry, where we're speaking about you and the humbleness and the way that you are around other people and the way that you make them feel. Do you feel like you have a good support when you are in those camps and the conversations that you're having to help you get through those tougher times?
I will definitely have a good support network around me for sure. I've got a good team in Dublin. When I go away to train in these places, I've built up relationships in Iceland and Thailand all over. And I suppose you do take a lot from, especially my coaches in Dublin. I suppose that without even knowing, they're really supporting me mentally. I'm not going to say telling me what I need to hear, but steer me in the right direction for sure. Keeping me level-headed during camp, keeping me motivated, keeping me right, basically, I suppose. Yeah.
And has your approach evolved through the different the different events that you've had? Is this one different to the last one, or?
Well, they might be changing without me even meaning to change them. It's like depending on who I'm fighting, because everyone has a different style. There's so many different styles in MMA. Like my last fight was against a jiu-jitsu guy, so I had to have I suppose that's more physical. My game plan against him, but my game plan against him was to strike more. So then I kind of associate aggression with striking, and now this guy I'm fighting is a kickboxer, so automatically I'm thinking grapple with him, and then that's more what would you say? I'm not going to say more technical, but it brings me into a different mindset again. So every fight I have a different mindset, but not really on purpose, if that makes sense.
I find it really fascinating listening to you, Darragh, and just the way that you're giving context for different scenarios. Different camps will have different focus depending on who you're fighting, and it reminds me of the type of you're going to be sick of talking about mindset now by the end of all this, and we finally got to it. Gemma asked a question that was much more clear, and we got exactly what we're looking for in terms of a process, step by step. Sometimes it's session by session, sometimes it's day by day. You're not even thinking about the whole camp. So that was really interesting to hear that. I'm curious to know, like there's an awful lot of components to being a professional sports person. There's the physical work, there's the active recovery, and then there's the preparation for different types of opponents. How much time needs to go into the analysis of your opponent to understand what their strengths, weaknesses, where their opportunities are within each fight?
Yeah, there's a lot. I suppose it's like any sport really. Preparing for a team, you're in a football match, say your coaches and your background team are going to make out a plan. They're going to pick the weaknesses. That's exactly what my coaches do. It's not so much myself. Like, I'll watch my opponents as well, but my coaches are able to pick his weaknesses a lot easier. They can see things a lot easier than I can, and then they'll set the game plan. They'll work on things, on my strengths as well as his weaknesses, and come up with a plan that is going to be the easiest route to victory. And I suppose that comes down to me having a lot of confidence in them as well. I trust that they're going to have a good plan ready for me, and I'm happy with the plan we've got for my next opponent already. So we're just putting it into practice now.
No, that's some insight. That's really, really interesting. And I wouldn't have known something like that. I suppose, how would I? But can you give us, and I don't, can you give us um, maybe another insight or an example of where you've executed a game plan? Like, how does you get this information from your coaches, and then you're in the situation? Does it play out like that? Do you see, as you're going through the experience in the fight, this homework has worked? Does that feel like that?
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to muscle memory, because when you're in there, you don't want to be doing too much thinking because maybe the opportunity's already passed you. So if you make the plan, say 2 months out from the fight, and you're drilling that, every single day of the camp, uh, in theory, the idea should be that by the time the fight comes round, you don't even have to think, and you just do it. So good example of that was my pro debut. I faced an English guy. He's very tall. He's 6'3". He's very long for the weight, and my coaches made up a game plan for him. So we had 2 months preparing for him. He pulled out of the first fight, and then I had another 3 months to prepare for him. So a big detail of it was we thought he was very heavy on his lead foot. So he was prone to being calf kicked. So he kicked on the calf, and in MMA you can't take much damage to the calf. So we had calf kicks, and we had a few other sequences. Now there wasn't much to it, but just a few things that could really change the fight. So we drilled these for months, and by the time the fight came around, I didn't even think, and I think 2 calf kicks changed the whole fight, and we ended up finishing them in a minute and a half. But without those calf kicks, it would have been much trickier to close the distance on him and get in and take him down. So something as simple as that changed the whole fight.
I think that's remarkable. I think it's so interesting.
That's incredible, because it's showing, you're saying it's simple, but it was the amount of times that you repeated that simple process over and over again to allow it to be as effective as it was in competition. How would you say, how important is those foundations, or are those foundations in just becoming really effective at the basics?
That's it's everything. Like you might get away with it to a certain level, not having the basics down to a T. Um, Depending on, I suppose, what level of athlete you are as well, but eventually if you don't have the basics, you're going to get found out once you do get up in the higher leagues. So eventually you're going to have to address that issue.
And is that something that's spoken about even at your level? Are you still working on the foundations? And
yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. Now I know the basics and the fundamentals, but there's a lot that goes into perfecting them as well, and I'm still a long way off it. It's there's that much to this game. You could go down 30 or 40 different avenues, and you're never going to learn it all. It's like picking a few avenues that suit you and suit your style for your game, and it's trying to get those fundamentals as close to perfect as you can. So it's constantly trying to perfect them and constantly working on the fundamentals, and then maybe adding one or two things every camp, like a new tool or a new weapon, and trying to get it to the level where you can actually use it in competition as well.
do you find in the most successful, that's what the key is, but then others that maybe come into the sport might get attracted to the shiny new things, like the moves, other moves that might be new in the sport and introduced by other big fighters, but maybe not pay enough attention to those foundations?
Yeah, you do see these guys as well, and it's not to say they're not successful, because I've seen it in the UFC, like the top tier. I've seen them get close to top 10 in the world, top 5, but eventually they're going to come across someone who is cleaner and has cleaner fundamentals, and usually they do get found out. And usually these guys who who take that approach are real high level athletes. They're, they've got fast twitch muscle fiber, they've cardio for days, they can get away with it. Whereas someone who's not as much of an athlete, that's where it kind of becomes even more important to have the fundamentals, they can't afford to be lacking.
Can I ask what, in very simple terms, what the fundamentals mean?
It would be easier. Well, I suppose in MMA, let's say there's 5 core martial arts you would train, but boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, and judo, say. So that's 5 martial arts. Now there's a lot more, obviously, but that's, say, the 5 that come into it. In MMA, you need to know the basics of each one of those different martial arts. And if you don't have the fundamentals in any of those, that's going to be a big hole in your game. And it's going to be something that needs patched. So you need to have a basic understanding and have the basics down to a decent level in each of those. And then as you progress, you need to obviously try and up your skill set. And you're going to find out, you can pick, but you're going to gravitate towards which one you're best at. So you need a basic understanding of every martial art. And then maybe you want to be more of a kickboxer. So you would train more kickboxing, or vice versa. You could be more of a grappler and you more jiu-jitsu.
And I've seen, I heard you already talk about other fighters being kickboxers. How would you describe yourself?
I'm definitely more of a grappler. So a lot of heavy wrestling against the fence mostly. And I started in jiu-jitsu. So wrestling and jiu-jitsu are my main background. But recently, now in the last year, I'm trying to even things out, and I'm doing a lot of striking work. So yeah, I'm trying to even things out now, and I'm starting to enjoy the striking aspect of things too. So like I really neglected my striking for maybe the guts of a full year, and I was skipping my kickboxing classes, my boxing classes, and I was going and doing extra wrestling and extra jiu-jitsu, and I wasn't coming up against any issues. I was getting away with it. I knew myself that it was going to be an issue eventually, and then I came up against a tough English guy in a fight, and he was able to keep getting back up and up and up, and every time I took him down, and I just felt so uncomfortable on the feet, and it was a very high-paced 15 minutes of just constant wrestling, which is probably the most tiring aspect of all of MMA. And I took a few big shots, so I knew straight away after that one there was no more skipping kickboxing or boxing. I had to start working on my striking, and I let it go to the dogs, to be honest. So there was a lot of hard work, and that was back to the fundamentals. Uh, a lot of paying for private sessions with the expert, as you were asking, and just never missing kickboxing sparring or pad sessions, and just trying to play catch up. But it's coming together now nicely, so I'm more well rounded these days.
Would you find in each different fight that it would expose some sort of weakness?
Yeah, so like every opponent has their strong areas and they have their weak areas, and maybe he's better than you in your strong area, and that's going to expose you as well. That's going to highlight your weak points in your strong area, because even though jiu-jitsu would be my strong area, there's being good on top, I could be bad on bottom. Certain positions I could be very weak in, and that would highlight that issue for future opponents as well who might try and exploit it. So every opponent you come across can highlight different things or make you look good in different areas. It just depends on how your skills clash against each other. They always say, like, in MMA math, it doesn't work. Like if I beat fighter A, and fighter A had beat fighter B, it doesn't technically mean that I'm going to beat fighter B, because all the skills match up differently. Yeah. So I could fight very well against fighter A, but B could just be my kryptonite, and so there's a lot that goes in there. Yeah.
We have called this conversation "Live Like an Athlete," Darragh, because we want to give people an insight to the world of high performance and athletic performance, but we also want to be able to show people that there's lots that can be learned. And like there's no doubt from listening to you that there's a confidence in what you do, there's an application, there's a work ethic, there's a process, there's recognizing what you're good at, what you need to work on, there's the fundamentals, and there's a huge amount of that comes through in all of the conversations that we have. In terms of the way that you live your life to perform at your best, how would you describe the fundamentals within your habits and behaviors that allow you to day in, day out, train at the level that you need to train at to continue to progress?
Well, I need to be on top of my diet. Um, I need to make sure that I'm getting in my recovery sessions, like the cold water, sauna. Um, I think sleep's the biggest one. Um, Especially now that I'm dropping back down a weight class. I find that I need sleep more than ever because my calories are dropped and I'm losing quite a bit of weight. So I think if I look after my recovery, then I can keep showing up and performing at the classes. And obviously my nutrition as well. I have to be on top of that.
There's a couple of parts, and I'm really keen to get Eva and Gemma's thoughts on this too, and to ask.
Mhm.
But you are putting yourself under this level of physical stress and those physical demands. Have you, like, when did your nutrition journey or your appreciation for nutrition, for your training, for your performances, when did that become something that you're really conscious of?
Um, well, as I said at the start, I used to, I didn't have a notion with my approach to training, and I used to, if I had, because in MMA you have to make weight, you have to either make, say, lightweight's 155 pounds, featherweight's 145. You have to show up on weight, or the fight's off. So I think at the start I used to wing it myself, and I'd basically starve myself. And I remember at times too, I was cutting out all carbs for the whole camp, which is just ridiculous, obviously. Um, and then once I started getting, maybe I think it was maybe my first title fight at amateur, I thought I would get a nutritionist. And these guys are also like experts in cutting weight, I suppose. And then recently, when I turned pro, I've started working with Yannick McGee, and his job is working with MMA fighters and getting them down to weight. And it's a whole science goes in there, as you know, especially in the weight cutting side of things. You know, he is the refueling, everything down to it. He tells me what to take, when to take it, what to eat, when to eat it, and it gets me back to 100%. So I suppose I started taking it very serious when I turned pro, maybe even a year before that.
And what have the biggest changes been, not just in your approach, but the changes from what you feel and your experience of training? Has that changed since you
Yeah,
changed your
100%. Like I think the biggest difference is just how much energy. I noticed it. I don't notice it so much now because I'm constantly on a healthy diet and fueled the right way. But I remember when I first changed it, I couldn't get over. It was like I got twice as fit in a couple of weeks. I couldn't believe it. The amount of energy I had. So it was a drastic change.
What was that, Darragh? Like, what were the big changes?
Just getting the right macros at the right times, the right type of foods. I suppose I didn't really have a clue. I thought I was just, eating healthy and what would you say? Just using my calories that I didn't go over them. That was my way of eating healthy. But I didn't really have a notion of why. And to be honest, I still don't really know. But I do what Yannick tells me, and I know it works. So.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because you're in a very demanding sport that needs such a high level of precision, and I think it's very clear that you have an appreciation for it. But if you think about how long, you're talking about a year before you went professional, you're doing a lot
Mhm.
of training before that,
Yeah.
and what's coming through in this. I mean, just listening to you talk about how much it impacted your recovery and your ability to perform and how much fitter you felt, this is ultimately the message that we're trying to communicate to the world. There's lots of young, ambitious athletes from multiple different sports, but certainly in combat sports where this is neglected, and it's exactly how you described. It's a punishment. It's cutting calories and cutting carbohydrates, and I think it's so positive to hear somebody like you in your position performing at your level, communicating the value of it, and it's your words, not ours. So it's really good to hear. Is there anything that you would, I know that, I suppose the question is there anything that you would say to young ambitious athletes, whether it be combat athletes or not, just people who are interested in understanding a little bit more about nutrition? I know, like anything, like the technical aspects of your training, there's a huge depth that you can go. But is there anything simple that you feel like these are, if I get this stuff right? So you mentioned sleep, but within your nutrition, if I get this stuff right, I know I'll be able to perform.
You're probably not going to get a great answer off me here, but I suppose on a very basic thing would be, if you have I suppose most people who play field sports would be carbon up pre-match, making sure you had a certain amount of protein in every meal, and just hit your protein goals. And I'm not sure to be
No,
honest.
but one of the things.
I suppose.
Sorry, I say that again.
So that's just on very basic, I suppose.
But so many people don't even have a strategy. They don't even think about it. And that's, you're talking about increasing your energy, increasing your carbohydrate and protein at every meal. Like, we have this action plan that we're developing, and those are three of the key actions that we're getting people to consider, because those things have this knock-on effect on the rest of your diet and how you feel. Because if you're doing those things, generally your energy levels are better, so you're more likely to make better decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
The way you speak about your foundations, they're ours, and they're the way that's what we're trying to communicate, that you'll soon get found out, if you go too far beyond the foundations without having them strongly in place.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And I've done that in the past.
Darragh, I'm really interested to know, in terms of measurement within, when we think about athletes, there's lots of different measures, and you mentioned weight, and I don't want to just talk about that aspect. You've got goals that you're working on from camp to camp. In terms of things like aerobic fitness or strength or power, are there other aspects of your physicality that you're looking at to try and always improve?
In terms of my physicality.
Yeah. So are there things that you're liking, that your coaches have given you feedback around, that you feel you could be stronger in this? And I don't mean just in the technical aspects, but that you physically could be fitter at this point, or are stronger or more explosive, and that becomes part of your training or a focus for a specific period.
Yeah, well, I suppose you can always be that bit stronger. You're never going to hear anyone complain about being too strong or too fit or too explosive. So, getting yourself to those points. I find personally that sprints for MMA is your best friend. Not at the time, but the benefits and the rewards you reap from them are definitely worth it. They get your recovery nice and quick. They get the explosive. I think it also boosts your testosterone quite a bit. So, for me, I like getting some hard sprints in. I find that's probably the biggest benefit for me. And now I'm a wee bit behind on them because I was got a bad infection for the last couple of weeks. So that's something I'm going to need to hit now to get my recovery times and everything back in line.
And are there phases across you've got these 4 weeks now until your competition, your fight. Is there a focus then? Obviously, you've got recovery time, but is there a clear focus on and periods within that phase for you to work on? Like, is it a clear year ahead, I suppose, after that?
Well, after this one now, see, there's a lot of things up in there. There's word of the promotion that I fight for being sold. So until more about that, I can't really plan the next one. If they're not sold, which is speculation, I'm not sure. The next fight would be February, so it'd be just staying busy, trying to improve technically now for the rest of this year, because it's very unlikely that I'll get fighting after September. So that'll be a period of pulling back on the strength and conditioning and trying to technically improve until my next fight comes around. And if I am fighting in February, if not February, it'll be March. After Christmas, I'll be getting back in shape and firing on all cylinders again. So.
Darragh, going even a little bit more granular, and this is probably a question you get asked maybe you get asked a lot, maybe you don't. But again, for people listening, you've already outlined that you train up to 6 days a week. Is that right?
Yeah.
What does a typical day look like in terms of a timeline? So I worked in professional sports and I know what a team sport day looks like. What does it look like for you?
So for instance, today we had MMA technique at 11 until 12. Then from 12 to 1, I had positional grappling, which was 30 minutes on the wall, sparring against the wall, takedowns, getting back up, I suppose, wrestling on the wall. And then 30 minutes in top half guard, which is a position in grappling. So that's a couple hours. I have pads from 6 to 7, and then I have jiu-jitsu after that. So that's what today looks like.
So in terms of hours per day, you're actively training for how many hours?
I find if you go any over, personally, especially when I'm cutting down, I find if you go over 4, you'll need to pull back a bit. It depends too, if it depends if you're doing more technical training, you could do that all day. But it's when you start hitting those red zones and you've got your sparring and it's going to catch up on you. You might need to take a couple of days off after a few tough days like that.
Mm. And something we talk about quite a bit is the hours spent training as one aspect, but you've got another 20 odd hours there that you're filling between sleep and how you're living. And an obvious question for me is, how do you switch off?
Maybe I'm too good at switching off. I need to keep my head more in the game, maybe. But I fill a lot of those 20 hours with a lot of sleep. I might get a 2-hour nap during the day and I'd have no bother sleeping for at least 9 hours at night, don't I? So I could sleep all day if you let me. But once I get the training done, everything else is.
But seriously, like, is it conversations? Are you meeting friends for coffee? Are you playing video games? Are you reading? Are you watching movies? What other things?
I find I've very little energy after training. I can't really, like, if I go and hang out with a friend or meet up for a coffee or something, I find that really takes the last wee bit of energy I have. And if I done it on the Tuesday, I'm not doing it on the Wednesday. I have very little energy to spare, so I'm happy enough just to rest up, sit around, get my foot on board, and get ready for the next session. To be honest.
And is that that's because it's so close to a fight? That's this period. What would it look like if outside when you're back home, or does it change?
Yeah, outside of camp, outside of camp's different. The training is not as intense. As I said, it's more technical, so I wouldn't be as tired. I'm not in a calorie deficit, so it's really just focusing on improving technically, and I've got loads of energy. I get out and meet everyone and get on with life. As I say, and camp's just a wee bit more miserable. So
Because you do seem to have a lot of friends back home and a lot of support. Your nickname's the Moville Mauler.
the Revolt Mauler, I'm not too keen on that one. That was Jordan Fury put that one on me,
Right.
so
Right.
maybe I'll have to get rid of it. But I get a lot of support from home. It's great. Like there's always at least 200 who come down to the fight. So it's a good night's crack. And it's good
It
to get
seems
everyone behind you too. It definitely spurs you on that wee bit more. You're suppose
really
you're fighting for them and all too.
it's just
It's
really good to
something.
see from such a small place.
Yeah, no, it is brilliant. It's something I suppose I forget that too, that I do get so much support, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I need to remember that, like.
Darragh, I'm very conscious now after you saying how much energy it takes to go for coffee, the fact that we've taken up a full hour of your recovery. So we're incredibly grateful for this. We really, really are. And
I know, worries.
Gemma said before you came on that you are really inspiring, and I've never heard her say that about anybody or anyone.
Thanks, John.
So that is an unbelievable compliment. But I cannot tell you how much we've taken from it. And also the little piece that you shared about the management of your energy. I think that was one of the biggest insights that I took. If you think about how much time that you've invested in your training, how focused you are in improvement, that's let's say 4 or 5 hours a day. And the awareness that you need to have that in order for you to be at your best and to recover, that it's not even a coffee that you can go for because that's going to drain you too. So I think there's huge lessons in that, that maybe there's a part of this that we naturally subconsciously have as advantages in our personality, but that's something that we've talked about a lot as a team and with the athletes that we're working with, how you manage that mental battery.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it now, and I know it sounds a wee bit much saying I can't even go. You can't go for your coffee and all. Uh, but when you go for your coffee, you're hanging out for a couple hours, and it does just drain you. There's times I could be home resting now. Maybe sometimes I regret going out and meeting up when I have to show up to training then exhausted. And you don't really take as much in of it as a technical session. You need to be switched on, awake and taking everything. And otherwise, it's just kind of showing up, and you're not really getting any further ahead. So we things that got do definitely come into it. When you think about the information you have to take on board, and you have to be switched on.
Yeah.
No, just thanks a million for coming on. It was brilliant insight, something that we haven't got insight to in this type of sport. So have to thank you massively, and best of luck with your fight.
And to
Thanks
say
very
as
much.
well, Darragh, you've got some more support here. We're going to be following you now and supporting you, and it's very exciting just from listening to Gemma to hear about your potential as an athlete and how far you can go. And from listening to you, it's very evident in why she spoke about you like that. So over to you, Gemma.
The only last question that I had, Darragh, was just, I suppose we're starting to ask this to everybody, but what in very, well, you can go brief or as deep as you want, but what
Mhm.
does it mean, or what does being an athlete mean to you?
I suppose it's kind of become who I am. It's my identity, I suppose. Anyone who knows me as the MMA fighter. That's who I've become, and I suppose it's a big sense of pride for me as well to be a successful athlete. That's where I set my bar of where I want to be, is all through being an athlete. So it's a massive part of my life, and long may it continue, I suppose.
That's incredible. Darragh, thanks very much.